Welcome to the Liberated Feminine Podcast. I'm Lucy Lampy, your host. And in today's episode, we have a very special guest. God, I love this woman. She's one of my favorite humans. Toni Brianna Guida Wendel, who is a shibari artist and practitioner and a multi-faceted artist. And she is also expecting and due soon. So we were just vibing out over pregnant stuff and other things. Yeah. And we're going to be diving into all these different themes related to rope bondage, but especially connecting with spirit through rope bondage. So, Toni, I'll let you take it from here. Anything you want to add to that introduction? And, how did you get into what you're doing?
Oh, well, thank you for that amazing introduction that got me so much glee. Yeah, I also am a huge fan of yours as, a creator, artist, and as a mother. Oh my gosh, you have been so inspiring to me.
Thank you.
And you're one of those people I look up to in this pregnancy as like, I fucking got this,
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for, just being a beautiful inspiration and person in my life for so many years now. We have known each other quite a long time and made a lot of art and creations and events together that I'm really proud of. So thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you for being here.
So let's see. How did I get into rope bondage? Such a good question.
Probably feels like a long time ago. You've been at it for
many moons
a while.
Ago. Yes. Yeah. So I have been practicing about 12, maybe going on 13 years now. I would say 12 years solid. But I first saw rope bondage actually on Tumblr. Like when I was like a young 20-some-year-old, I was like a little Tumblrina. I loved Tumblr. I'm like, bring back Tumblr. But I would see so many images of it. And I was always very like just entranced and in awe of the artistry and the beauty of the art, right? And of course, there's the kind of erotic taboo element that really gripped me. But I was in this like long-term relationship, and he was a little like kink shamey about it. Like didn't want to explore with me. Made me feel kind of weird about being interested. And of course, lo and behold, I found him like talking to other people about it. I was like, I'm not even that mad that you're cheating. I'm like mad that you're talking about shibari.
No.
Oh, yeah. Well, that brings you into the whole Madonna whore complex, right? That some people suffer from. But I moved to the Bay Area after that partnership ended, and I was in the Bay in August. So like first event I went to was Folsom Street Fair. And I was just, enthralled with the whole world of BDSM. But especially, I really wanted to explore more rope. And somebody there said, oh, you should get like a FetLife, which, is kind of like a kinky Facebook.
That's a good way to put
it. It's one of those places that's like great to find events, not great to socialize on, because there's like just a lot of weirdness, right, on FetLife. So I'm a big fan of using it to find events, but then doing in-person real human connection to explore, because the internet can be a scary place.
It's a wild place.
Wild place. Yeah, right. But the first event I saw that looked interesting was this event called Bondage A Go-Go at the Cat Club in San Francisco.
Oh.
And so I went and I saw rope suspension for the first time, and I was just enamored. Like I had never seen anything like it. I was just, I remember I went to this event by myself, and I was just like in the front row, staring at the rope suspension all night. And, I always tell people starting out, I'm like, I really wouldn't recommend this technique of getting into rope bondage, but my first time in rope, I talked to one of the riggers there that night and came back maybe a couple of weeks later to the same event first time in rope bondage was in suspension, live in front of an audience.
I love this so much.
So I really jumped in the deep end, which again, not recommended, extremely high risk, but also I feel important for my journey.
Right.
Because who knows, maybe I wouldn't be a professional rope artist and it wouldn't be such a pivotal part of my life had I not kind of gotten into it in such a way. And, my whole life I was a performer. I did drama. I was a theater kid most of my life, like from, preschool, elementary school, all the way through high school and into college. I did theater, but it didn't really ever click for me as an actual profession or career, So when I found when I found rope bondage for performance, I really felt like I had found my medium as entertainer and performer. And, now it's expanded to become so much more. That's one of the things I love about rope is it is a shapeshifter. And, but a big part of it is still my performance and my art and my entertainment profession, which I use rope to do.
Yeah. I'm grateful that you did jump all the way in. I think we also resonate with each other in that sense, because it's like when we feel drawn to something, we just kind of dive in.
Oh, yeah.
It's like me with a pole. Yeah. What's this easing into something stuff? I don't know. I'm not familiar.
Yes, exactly. No. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, that's one of the things I really tell students or people who come to me for rope education is like, what's the vibe? Like, why are you here? Do you want to do bedroom bondage? Are you here just to connect with your partner? Are you here because you're like super into rope and the art itself and things like that? Because that will really inform how you engage with the practice, right? Like, I think that there used to be this really big issue in rope, which made it so inaccessible, where a lot of the education assumed you wanted to become this like rope master, right?
Right.
And so people really just want to do bedroom bondage or just want to use it to connect with their partner. And it's really more of a tool than like a craft or a practice or something that is really focused on the technical aspect itself, right? So I just realized people were not being taught in a way that was accessible for them and also like made sense for what they were trying to use it for. So yeah, I see a lot of like new people. I would see them run into this wall of like frustration because they're like, I'm trying to be like cute here on a date and connect with my partner and I'm confused and tinkering and frustrated and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't feel sexy.
Yeah, like this harness is really fucking hard. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I was like, you really don't need to do all that. Like, we could teach you, like a double column is kind of like handcuffs, speed cuffs, tying someone to a bedpost. And I often tell people, like, just learn a really good double column and learn how to do it very smoothly. Learn how to do it with your eyes closed or in the dark. And
especially in the dark. That comes in handy.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to revisit my techniques. I mean, that's how I found you in the first place. I think it was through Frank, a friend who is a photographer. Yeah. And I had gotten interested in just tying my legs and just it felt nice and the pressure and the imprints and then you had this was during COVID. You had an online workshop. And I did that and it was on Zoom I think that's where we were on Zoom and we're doing the thing and I'm tying and I'm like, am I doing this right? But you were such a patient and thorough teacher. And so then of course, I mean, and you have this very nurturing, attentive presence, you know, and then in person, I got to experience that even more. So for those listening too, Toni has tied and suspended me twice, which is the best. Oh my God, I have a whole, okay, yeah, actually that. Let's get into that because I full on had like spiritual experiences during these tying sessions. And we've done other projects together, but like just specifically that, the experience of surrender and getting to somatically experience that in a safe environment is so fucking healing. So whatever you would like to speak into that, even getting into the science after a bit, we can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is, you know, that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about. You know, it's funny, most of my life people said, you should be a teacher. And I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. It was because I didn't have anything that I was like so passionate about. And now that I am so passionate about this, I love to teach. And I also thank my Montessori school upbringing for allowing me to mold my teaching style to each individual I'm working with. And one of the things I found, so my undergrad is in psychology. And as someone who also, you know, struggled with mental illness and, you know, also like my connection to source or God or spirit, whatever you want to call it, you know, my higher power, like always kind of having my spirituality, but not knowing how to define it, how to practice it, how to connect, in a daily way that really felt like prayer, you know? There was just so many, techniques that I would try, but nothing really felt, nothing really clicked, right? And one of the things that I think is so powerful about rope bondage is, you know, I think therapy is so important. I think the logical, heady brain part of, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy and really like going through all of those like mental tracks we get on, all of that like rewiring of the brain, it's so important for healing, right? That is a very quintessential part of it. But I think where a lot of Western medicine falls off is the integration into your body. And rope bondage is such a powerful way of it demands that you be present. It demands that your mind and your body and your spirit work together. You really don't have another option, which is a beautiful feeling, right? Because I think for a lot of us, we're like constantly trying to click into that meditative feeling. Like I know for me, did yoga a lot, like most of my life. And I was like, I'm totally faking it when we're meditating and doing
going through the motions.
Like, I'm literally just sitting here being like, don't think about anything. Stop thinking, white room, white box, white room, white box. You know, like I could not really fully meditate. So I always kind of felt like I was trying to jump into that realm. And I always felt like I would get in for a second, but then I would get pushed back out, right? By either my mind or my body or something like that would push me out of that realm. And what I found so powerful about rope bondage is I literally was in that realm and I had to, like, you have to come out of it. Like it was the opposite feeling where I was so sunken in to this place of like full presence and full groundedness and full knowing of thyself, right? Like fully like, oh my gosh, I am my body. I am my mind. I am my spirit. And it is all connected. It is all one. And it is all connected to some sort of higher power. It's all connected to something that connects me to every other living, breathing thing. And maybe even, you know, the non-living, breathing things on the planet, right? I really was in that, that feeling. And And then you have to, you actually have to come down from that and like get back into the real world after. So it was kind of like this beautiful thing where it made me realize that like I didn't have to try so hard to access that space if I really kind of let it come to me and didn't like, it's kind of like that judging, trying, like, why can't I do it feeling that often keeps us from just being and existing and, like letting that spirit come into you. Right. And, not being an observer all the time, but being like the thing to observe or what have you, which is the beautiful part about being in rope and being witnessed, right? You're like in this surrender, you're being witnessed for who you are, you're vulnerable. And that's what can be so transformative and healing and powerful about it. I do always like to clarify that the space we're creating is a safer space. I really think it's important that people don't get disillusioned by any space that they're safe in it, right? Because I think it's really important that people start to cultivate the feeling of safety as like a quality within themselves.
Yes.
And not an external force. Like I see a lot of talk, especially in like white wellness spaces, even in BDSM and rope spaces where people will say this is a safe space or these are safe people. And the reality is like, no, space is safe. You are either safe as an individual wherever you go, whether you're in a comfortable, cozy home or whether you're walking down the street to Oakland, like you can either cultivate that sense of safety for yourself or you're going to be prey, basically, right? And I think that is one of the things that I really encourage people start to internalize instead of externalize is their sense of safety. Because the reality is the people and the spaces and the situations that are going to hurt us the most are the people closest to us, are the people that we love, are the people who, we feel the most vulnerable with, right? And I think that that's where a lot of the pain comes from is the disillusion that this person is meant to keep me safe. So when they hurt you, it's really jarring, right?
It's like a betrayal. It feels like a betrayal, even if it wasn't outright.
Exactly. So I think that, starting to be like, okay, my safety is my responsibility. And the other thing is like, the reality is rope bondage is dangerous. Like it is a edge play.
It's inherently dangerous.
There's inherently risk to your physical and mental body and high risk. I think anytime you open yourself up vulnerably, physically, mentally, spiritually, you have all of this opportunity for transformation and growth and healing, but you do have the risk of harming yourself, harming others. And sometimes that's a big part of the healing process, right? Is like, how do I navigate when something doesn't go right? How do I navigate when I get hurt? How do I navigate when I hurt someone else? And that's such a powerful part of this practice that I've found too, is relating to how to relate to others in conflict. Because I think that that's one of the skills, especially these days, that people avoid and they don't really cultivate a sense, like a skill set around how do I navigate conflict. So they will either avoid conflict or just have a negative association with it, right? Like I know I definitely have struggled with that. And it often leads to situations where I feel like I'm not being myself, I'm not being authentic, or I'm making choices that aren't in my heart, right? I'm making choices out of fear. And a lot of that comes from me having a negative association with conflict in whatever situation I'm in, right? I think it's really important to, rewire our association to conflict and not see it as like, this has to be bad, because conflict can actually be so powerful to deepen your intimacy and your connection to others and to yourself, right? You learn so much about yourself. And you get what you want in life, which is fucking awesome, right? You know, when you're able to
what
really...
What are you here for? Not to play it safe in the sense like, of avoiding difficult conversations that need to be had.
Exactly. And you end up losing a lot that could have been a gain, right? If you had really taken the time and patience and energy to learn how to navigate conflict in that specific situation. Like, you know, most of the times I've had something go wrong in rope bondage, I'm never going to do that shit again that way. You know what I mean? Like I learned
You learned your lesson
much. Yeah. Like it ends up being really a pivotal pinnacle moment of education and learning in my rope journey when something goes wrong, you know, and, you know, knock on wood, I, you know, don't want like anything egregious to happen, right? I don't want like, really bad things to happen. So I'm like, oh, yay, now I can get a lesson, right? Like,
yeah, I can get a lesson without a huge consequence.
Yeah,
that's the best case scenario.
That. Yeah, well, and that's one of the things is you want to mitigate your risk, and you know, there's a kind of like this saying in rope bondage, just not if but when something's going to go wrong when you've been practicing long enough, and especially if you're doing high risk activities like suspension. But the beauty is that if you're really intentional about navigating risk mitigation, then when things go down, you know, it's you bounce back from it in a beautiful way for both people, you know. Like the one time I really scary injured someone in rope, they got what's called wrist drop, which is like an immobility to the hand. And scared the shit out of me, right? But I learned so much about what my boundaries were as a top, because I didn't really have any. And so I was agreeing to things to be agreeable and to be at the top, and to, and it was also ego. I'm not going to lie. It felt good to stroke my ego and like, oh, this person wants me to do these things and I can do them. And oh my God, right? You know, like it was all about that. But I learned so much in like, oh, hey, as a top, as someone who is tying, like I have my own boundaries, and like I shouldn't be pressured or making choices to appease others and things like that. So that really like changed my relationship to tying in a really beautiful way. It also showed me like what I would do, you know, like I was super in contact with the woman, had her go see my body worker, and, you know, within a couple of days, it did clear up, and she, you know, her hand was feeling better and mobile. But it was really cool to see my process in like how I would navigate injury, and being an active participant in, you know, like if we're going to be partners in rope, we're going to be partners in like finding you the healing and the help you need to navigate if something goes wrong. And that not only became a great blueprint for me, but I was able to like teach others that, hey, that's kind of the right thing to do. Like if you injure somebody, like be part of the process of making sure that they're getting the support they need as they're healing. And also like talk about that shit before you tie, you know, like, do you have health insurance? Did they have health insurance? Did they have access to a body worker? Do you have access to a body worker? Who's going to pay for it? Who, you know, is going to take the responsibility? Because one thing I noticed is we have this kind of archaic way of looking at the top and bottom perspective. Like I've been injured way more times as a top.
I know we've had that conversation. It's like, I would have never thought that.
Yeah,
my mind.
and that's the thing. I've never had a bottom like, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me like support you through your injury, right? And not to say that that's like their, they would never know to do that because it's just not part of our culture in rope. We have this weird culture of like the top is like fully responsible for everything that happens in the scene, and the bottom is just a passive participant. So that's one of the things that I really want to change about this industry, because the thing is like, if we were professional dancers or professional athletes in any other realm, and your partner, either one had an injury, that's something you would like be, part of navigating, right? If you were actually partners in this activity. And I think also, the maintenance of like taking care of your body and your spirit and your mind, if you're going to be doing this regularly enough, and especially if you're going to be doing high risk activities within this practice.
Because it's mentally, not just physically for the one leading or topping. I've had this also with my good friend who's a dominatrix. She said, she struggles sometimes with self-care because it's, you get in a mode of, I'm here to just serve people through dom, through topping in whatever form. And it's like, you really have to attune to yourself too. And that there's so many different layers of this that you are really confronted with, looking at reality, looking at these deeper parts of yourself. Do I have inner safety in myself? Because actually, I love that you pointed that out, because there is no safe space. There is no 100% safe space. There are the spaces that, the way that I describe, it's like cultivating inner safety is a must. And how we do that, part of it is just exactly what you described, and kind of taking these steps, trusting your intuition, trusting that you're being guided in some, more complex way than we can possibly understand. And that no matter what that outcome is, we're going to be okay. And we are held, we are loved. And even if there's something gone awry, we can navigate that. And the more we do that, the more trust and self-confidence and inner safety we cultivate with that source. And then it's not a resenting someone for, oh my God, they were unsafe, they hurt me. You also define better boundaries. And like you said, define what you need through that.
Yeah. And people can feel that, like I do not get messed with because you can feel the bubble. I can give you one look and I'm not a bullshit, No. And that's something we all have. We all have that ability, And I think that there are telltale signs when somebody is relying on others or their external situation to keep them safe. And that's what predatory people are looking out for.
Yes. They can sniff that energy out.
Yeah. They're like, do you have a strong sense of self and a strong sense of your surroundings and a strong sense of what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable? Because they can definitely tell when you don't. And so I think that is one of the really important things is to, and I think also one of the things that's been really important for my journey in healing is to not look at people as just simply predators or simply evil, right? Because if they're a predator, that means that you're prey, right? And I think that humans are so much more complex than that, Yes. And that's one of the things, I've kind of reestablished my practice and connection to my Nichiren Buddhism. I have Japanese family, and so I've practiced on and off Nichiren Buddhism, and I'm doing a lot more chanting these days and a lot more getting back into that practice, which has felt so good. But part of Buddhism is it's like the people who are hurting others typically need the most love and support. And we can do that for others in our lives. Like maybe you aren't willing to, like maybe you aren't ready to forgive. Maybe you aren't willing to let go of somebody who has hurt you yet. But the first step is the willingness to not wish badly upon them, right? Is to wish the best for them, is to wish that they do find good in their heart, basically, right? And that can be so hard for us, especially because there's so much evil activity, right? That happens.
Yeah, there is a lot of fear. I mean, that's all just rooted in the fear. Yeah.
Yeah, but those are people who have never experienced unconditional love, you know? Those are people who have never experienced a true connection to a source or God or a connection to all living things, you know? Those are people who are lost, very hurt, very sad souls, you know?
Yeah.
And so that has been extremely helpful for me to not demonize people, because then you start to do the whole pedestal demonization of everybody in your life and of yourself. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And part of, I think, coming to my sense of God, right, was coming to love all parts of myself and all parts of like the design and all parts of the nature of how things work, right? Because some of it not my favorite, right? Some parts of myself,
that's
not my favorite,
and that's like that. It's like that's normal.
But I love them still, right? Because they're essential to the functioning. They're essential to the whole. And that really shifted my entire perspective of, like how I was even seeing things, you know? And, when I was really able to, let go of that resentment and the pain and suffering of the world and kind of like, just kind of let it be what it is. Even within myself, you know, which I think is a big part of what rope bondage has taught me, right? Like sitting in your suffering or sitting
literally like just sit with it. You can't go anywhere.
Like who are you when you are completely out of control? Who are you when you're completely helpless? Who are you when there's, when you are at the full surrender of something outside of yourself? And when I was able to sit with that and process that, and then also start to feel powerful in that process, feel abundance in that process, feel the receiving in that process, and then truly loving who I was in that like super raw, vulnerable, immobilized position. I found true acceptance of myself and true acceptance of, all things. And that allows so much gratitude to come in and so much abundance. And gratitude and abundance just feed off of itself, So the more gratitude and abundance that you can recognize and honor, the more will come to you, I've found.
It's more like attracts like, and also the peace in that, because with that depth of acceptance and surrender, it's ironic too. I remember telling people, and they would ask, how was your experience, especially the first suspension we did in your place with the rig and everything and the photo shoot. And I was like, it felt so liberating to not be able to move.
Yeah.
It's because, when you're in your heart, in your spirit, you're like, fuck, I'm surrendered. There is no greater freedom, because it's like, you have to not only sit with the discomfort, but it's like you choose to trust.
Yeah. And if you can be free in bondage, you are free. You know, you are.
Yeah.
That is true freedom when you can cultivate that, even when you are completely in bondage, you know?
Yeah. Immobilized. Like, seriously.
Exactly. If you still free then you are a free human of this earth, which I think it's just so important, you know? I think we live in a time in a society right now that is all about consumption and needing more and wanting more and doing more and all of this shit. And most of the people I know, myself included, we have everything we fucking need, right? And we are making ourselves miserable by feeling like it's not enough, like what we have's not enough, who we are is not enough. And of course, you always want to be a student of the earth, and you always want to grow, and you always want to learn and continue to enjoy the journey and not focus on a destination. But I think what's so important is there is no destination, right? Is people,
exactly.
They still, even when they're like, okay, well, I'm enjoying the journey as I get to the destination. It's like, give the destination up, right? Because the truth is that the destination is our inevitable death, right?
It's true. We have all these mini micro destinations along the way that we think are going to give us that peace, but it doesn't.
Right. And you're really sacrificing your life for death, right? If you are so focused on that destination, right? So, it's just taught me, rope has taught me so much about, just loving the journey and like each little moment within it, you know. One thing that I super encourage people do in rope bondage is like slow down to an excruciatingly slow point where you are like only thinking about the exact thing that you are doing, right? And that was something that I could only find in rope bondage for a long time. But now I've finally been able to integrate it into every aspect of my life where I'm like, I am doing one thing at a time. Because the truth is multitasking, like people are always like, I can multitask. And it's like, you can, but something you're doing is going to suffer in quality.
Yeah. It's just a task switching. Because our brain can just function.
Also you're training your brain not to be present. That's just the in and out of it. And now we live in like a squirrel brain society in a very like multitask is necessary way of being. And it has really like stripped us of our humanity, right? Because now we're like fully brains instead of actually being like a brain in a body on the earth with our feet on the ground.
Exactly that. It's like grounding in, having the presence with your body. Because the thing is, when we have to, you know, as parents, it's like you have to be aware of multiple things. But if that's all you're doing, it's just not going to feel. It's not going to feel great. The nervous system's going to be like, "Oh, that's a
right." Lot. Oh my gosh!
So that presence,
kids thrive on presence, you know? Like, obviously you have a lot to juggle, but when you're with your kids, oh my God, you can tell that they're just sucking in and absorbing so much when you're fully present with them, right? When you're distracted, when you're doing a bunch of other stuff, those are the moments that, I mean, I think they're important for kids to learn, like, okay, the world is going to be like this sometimes. And how do I regulate, of course, right? Yeah. But I saw this great TED Talk with like a 9-year-old girl. I think she was like, I don't know, I'll have to send you it. She's like this little British girl. And she's talking about that, how like babies and kids and things like that, when you're like on your phone or you're distracted or you're not being present with them, that is actually like hindering their human development because they really need your full presence. Like they need to develop empathy, which is going to require a full face and eye contact.
That's the thing.
Yeah, them seeing
underrated.
how you were reacting to them and things like that. Because if you aren't, if they're not receiving that, which I think is why a lot of people struggle with their development of empathy and human connection these days, is because we're not getting enough face to face, which you really need. Like that's a big part of human development, is the mother and the child exchanging facial cues, noises, like cooing is a very important part of human development and stuff, because we're mirroring each other, right? And that becomes so important in your interpersonal relationships as an adult, is your ability to mirror and to accept a mirror of yourself, right? Because I know that's where like a lot of relationship conflicts come from, is mirroring each other and then being like hyper triggered from it, right? Because you're
it just escalates so quickly.
Right. You're like, oh, I don't like what I'm seeing, because you're seeing yourself, right? You're seeing something that is triggering something within yourself that you have not come to completion with. Which is why that's why intimacy is so important, right? Because it's
like really seeing each other,
right? It's other people seeing you, which allows you to truly see yourself, not only in an internal but an external perspective, right? Because that is one of the things, is sometimes we think there's who you perceive yourself to be, there's who you actually are, and then there's who others perceive you to be, right? 3 or more different people,
or more different perspectives.
Each person is going to have a different version of you too, so there's a million,
we're making peace with that,
right? There's a million yous running around out there in the world, and it's really hard to cultivate your sense of self when there are so many versions of you, and so I think that's why unconditional love and really deep interpersonal connections and intimacy with others is so important, because you really get to see and know yourself in a really deep way that makes you unshakable, which is so important, right? Because I know I'm a very like moldable person. I know that about myself. I'm very adaptable, which actually is one of my greatest strengths. It's like my heroic flaw.
It's an asset. Right? We're totally using it with awareness.
It is totally my heroic flaw. It's like my Achilles heel. It's all of these things where I am so adaptable, which is like this beautiful thing about me. It's my favorite quality about me, is like literally put me in any situation, have me talk to any person, any animal, and I'll figure it out. Like I will bury that shit and figure it out. I can adapt, which, again, that's like the quality that makes me have that quality you spoke about when I teach, that is actually very successful with people, is my ability to adapt. And I love that about myself, but it did become a hindrance and a flaw and a source of discomfort and stress and problems in a lot of my relationships as well. Because I would constantly be trying to adapt to what others wanted out of me or out of the relationship. Or, I was just being too adaptable to the point where it was hard for people to actually recognize and therefore actually unconditionally love me, right? Because if I'm constantly adapting to you and you don't have unconditional love for yourself, right? And also, who am I, right? It became this very complex thing where I was kind of shifting into versions of myself that I didn't really resonate or like, right? And then if I don't resonate and like myself, how could you possibly know and resonate and like me, right? Like I've often found that in romantic partnerships, right? Is I will be with people who are like a little I'm going to say it. I have a thing for people who are controlling. And I think it's
just fully owning it.
It's true. And I think it's because I am so comfortable in chaos. I'm so, go with the flow. I'm a Pisces, right? I'm just like a dreamer, right? That stability and structure, and somebody who's very like, regimented, actually can be really nice for me, right? That can be a really beautiful pairing. But what I've realized is that if those people don't realize that like their regimen is for themselves, and maybe not like, I'm just not ever going to be a naturally regimented person, and we can work together and basically like, it's a great partnership, but you shouldn't demand that I become you, right?
Like him.
Yeah. And I've realized that I enjoy being with controlling people. But one of the things that will happen is they will start to, like, they will be so enamored with me and like be so into me. And then they will slowly whittle down what it is that makes me and try to like, kind of tweak me and mold me to be this person that they want me to be. And then they end up not liking that person or wanting to be with that person or loving,
and because it's not who they even are, and you can't love somebody if you don't know what that is that you're loving.
It's so complicated when it comes to that I've definitely gotten to the point where I'm just like, I think I need to be focused on, and that's been the beautiful thing about my upcoming motherhood. Well, it already feels like motherhood. This guy has such a little personality in there. Like I'm already like learning a lot, right? But the beautiful thing about motherhood is like romantic relationships aren't on the short list of priorities at the moment,
right?
Which has actually made them much easier to navigate, right?
Makes it less like more clarity on what you're focusing on.
Right, exactly. And I'm not focused on romantic partnership for the sake of romantic partnership. I'm focused on romantic partnership for partnership in life, which is huge.
Yes.
I think that, it's very, I think the reason like so many people are single and unpartnered these days is because we have somehow gotten the impression, especially in like the United States, maybe it's the swiping app and, just the way that we consume in this country. But people tend to think that their partnership should be some sort of source or resource energy.
So much.
Yeah. And a lot of the times I'll hear, you should be making me happy.
And this is a big one. Yeah.
That is going to doom any relationship, because my grandparents were together 64 years. They survived the Holocaust together. They had 3 kids. They lived a life, and they, lived into their 80s and 90s. I promise you, there were periods of time where they were not happy with each other or themselves. And that's the beauty of partnership, is seeing each other through unhappiness, right? That's actually what makes a good partnership, is being able to love each other through those times. And because that's life, right? Life is going to have its happy moments, its unhappy moments, its neutral moments. It's, it's going to be all of the things. And, you really, I don't see any reason to have a partner if it's not to partner through it all, right?
Yeah.
And, that does take constant negotiation. That does take constant, like, reformatting your dynamic and the rules and regulations and how you're going to go about things, right? And sometimes it may take separation. Like, one of the things I love about my parents' dynamic is they divorced when I was 3. My mom is a lesbian, so she's with women now. And so obviously they have not been a romantic sexual partnership forever, but they are such amazing partners in co-parenting and still in life. They're really close friends. Like, they're, my dad and his wife and my mom and her wife are like really good friends. Like, my mom just went through some medical stuff, and like my dad and his wife were like there to like help her through it. Right. Yeah. And that is like, that's true partnership, right? That's like, oh, I'm going to see you through it all, whether or not our dynamic looks the same or not. Right. And I think that's been kind of a lost art, I think, for a lot.
Well, in real partnership, like what it is to be a partner. And the thing is, it's like, and we learned that too in like, just like when we're doing something like rope bondage or some kinky activities, there's so much more communication, so much more awareness of our needs, our boundaries, the other person's needs, when you do it in a conscious way. Granted, there are plenty of people who just do it like as a power trip or an ego thing, but this is a real powerful tool of deepening love. And when you do that and you bring that into your relationship and into your life, and it's like, okay, like for example, the difference between it being invested in someone's well-being versus being responsible for their happiness. That's one really big one. And then just, compatibility. Like, what I have to give, does it match with what you need? Yeah. And how much of that is really important and how much is more of a preference? And all of these things, we literally, when you practice this in a somatic way, in an environment that is created consciously for that, it's just, it's so powerful.
And I mean, that is one of the things that I love about this practice too. And one of the things that really made me realize like who I am as a partner and a person in life is my feelings do matter. My feelings are valid. Yes. And I want people in my life to give a shit about my feelings. And I want to care about your feelings, vice versa. I think that's really important. But I think one thing I've realized is, to me, unconditional love means that regardless of my feelings, I would never keep my partner from living their life to their fullest and fulfilling their life's path and doing what they need to do to live, right? And to feel fulfilled and to feel satisfied and to feel like they leave this realm having done everything they wanted to do.
Yes.
So I love that way. I want to be loved that way, right? And I think that, that doesn't mean that you wild out and just do whatever the fuck you want and like your partner to deal with it. No, like talk about feelings, talk about how you're going to navigate those situations. Your feelings are so important. Your partner's well-being, your partner not experiencing pain based on your decisions. All of that is so important. But I think where we all miss the mark sometimes is that might just be a negotiation and a conversation away.
Yes.
And that, I think that we have a hard time being really honest about like, what makes us uncomfortable, what would make us more comfortable, how we would be okay with navigating something like that. And like, is this something that like is, gonna work for me? And like you were saying, weighing the options of like, okay, is this something that is going to, be, like, do I need to do it in this way? Is the risk, is the cost going to be worth the benefit? Right. Things like that. But I think that one of the things is that a lot of people love in a possessive manner, right? Because if your feelings, because feelings are fleeting, feelings can change, feelings can develop or, transmute over time, right?
Yeah.
So through conversation, through time, through build trust, through all of these things, your feelings may actually change, right? So to be making your decisions for yourself, but especially for your partner, based off your feelings, I think is why we struggle so much and we run into so much conflict with ourselves and each other, is because we're not taking our feelings as information and then making
information
a really well-rounded decision together on it, right? Because the thing is, like, I used to fully operate on feelings. Like, whatever I felt, I would make my decision and I would do. But what I realized is it was never, hardly ever getting me to my intended goal.
Yeah.
It was never, the result when I would make my choices off feelings was 9 out of 10 times, the result was not what I wanted it to be. So I think it's so important to take information from your feelings, but not that your feelings are making the decisions, because our feelings should be informing us, but they shouldn't be controlling us, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So I think that that's one of the really important things, is to think about it. Like, okay, I feel this way, right? Like, let's say you're like, I feel really jealous in my partnership, right? But if I create all of these big conflicts around my jealousy, now me and my partner have like a weird trust issue, right? Like, I've definitely run into that where I actually became more untrustworthy because my partners didn't trust me, right?
Yeah.
They didn't trust me, and I knew they didn't trust me. So then I was like watching everything I was saying and doing and being really calculated about how I would present information to them because I didn't want to like lose more trust, right?
Yeah.
And so now I'm being less trustworthy than I would have originally had we not, had you not been making it known that you were like worried about me, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that and then, that's like the self-fulfilling prophecy of it all. Right. So I think it's important to say, like, okay, I'm feeling jealous, right? But does that mean that I don't trust my partner? And if that is the case, then you really need to go directly to the trust source of like, I have problems around trust. Why is that? Maybe it's like things I've been through in the past that you're now projecting onto your partner, right? Maybe it is,
that's a tricky one too.
Right. And, or maybe there is really something that your partner has done that you haven't found resolve in, right? There's multiple things, but you're not going to the source of the issue when you're operating from jealousy. And now your jealousy is exacerbating the source issue, is the root of the problem has now sprung to become more of a problem because we were operating from jealousy rather than I have trust issues, right? So yeah, that's one of the things that I've really learned again from rope bondage is like, even in your physical discomfort in the rope, right? If you immediately are like, I'm uncomfortable, something's wrong, et cetera, right? It will exacerbate. You will feel tense. The rope will be more intense. You will get anxious. It will just escalate, right? But if you're able to say, I'm uncomfortable because this band needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, separating the facts from the feelings.
Yeah, your top can go in and adjust that band. And I mean, you've experienced it in my rope. There's moments where you're like, hey, this doesn't feel right. And I go in and I go, loop.
Yeah,
And
you're going to take it personal, like, oh my God, I'm horrible. Or I'm
right,
guys, it's
But
a conversation.
It makes it sustainable.
Yes.
You get that fix that you need. You get that, and you also get that loving care of like, oh, something went wrong and we navigated it together and it did not have to be an issue, right?
Exactly.
It was, if anything, it was a learning lesson. Now I know you don't like rope there, or you don't like it that way, or there was a twist, right? So now you've learned something about each other that's going to make the next high even more juicy and, less problematic, right? And I think that's just such a beautiful metaphor for the way that we can relate to each other as well. Is like, okay, what is the source issue of your pain, right? Let's go to that and let's fix it together. Let's both take an active role in responsibility. Let's not blame each other, right? Because what if you had been like, oh my God, her rope sucks? Or I had been like, oh my God, she's being a big baby, right? No.
This is the teamwork.
Yeah, that's the deep work of like letting go of all of those narratives, right? Or it could be vice versa, right? Maybe in my head, I'm saying, oh, I'm fucking up. Or in your head, you're saying, I'm not being a tough enough bottom, right? That happens too. And it's like, we need to release those narratives. We really do need to release those narratives about ourselves and about each other and go to the source of what's happening and work through it together. And I think that's like how we create and how we make art. And, that was one of the things that I was telling you about in my latest art project. I've been doing the Divine Comedy 2 art show. And I really want to expand it into like its whole lore. Like when I'm on maternity leave, I plan on getting back into my writing because I really want to like write all of my theories about this thing. But basically my next art project it feels like my masterpiece, right? Where it's like, I had this kind of theory that I'm working on where I'm like, that is what art and creation is. It is God for me, right? And I think that we get so stuck on the semantics or the narrative or how it's being told that to the point where we go to war for it, right? And we're all trying to describe the same thing. Every religion, all folklore, mythology, all great works of art, all great works of creation and expression is source and spirit speaking through us and is us trying to express that feeling of a higher power, that feeling of some sort of connection, that feeling of what it is to be human, right? We're all trying to describe the same thing and we're all trying to call out in our own way. And that's something I think is so beautiful. Like that's it, right? To me, I'm just like, that is whatever it is, right? And
and this is it. It's life flowing.
Yeah, that is life force, spirit, energy, art, creation, love, humanity, whatever it looks like for you or whatever you want to call it. We all have it. We all feel it. And I truly think that is what will heal ourselves and the earth, which is huge. A lot of people are unwell right now, physically and mentally. And that's because the earth is very unwell right now. And we cannot save it without saving, each other and saving ourselves and saving the planet. And, it's all interconnected. And I think that's, why we're seeing so many things just like continuing to kind of like spiral, because there's no way that we're really going to be able to heal ourselves by ourselves, right?
Yeah, we are meant to be we're meant to be in this together. And so to have more experiences and spaces where we can collaborate and be in partnership with other human beings on this returning back to, this like centered sense of self, our integrity, our the feedback that we receive from other human beings, that mirroring. It's so important. Yeah. And with that too, for me personally, that rope and kink in general has been such a profoundly healing part of my somatic experience. And I would recommend for anyone who lives in the area where you're at, for sure, to come by the Rope Collective. But is there anything that you would like to leave listeners with today around, this deepening self-trust, connection with spirit, relationships?
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
Like rope bondage.
And I think that's, one of the beautiful things about rope bondage that I like to, make sure that I like pay homage to is, I do think that there's a kind of a trend of the de-eroticism or the desexualization of rope bondage. And I kind of feel like, I'm sure you feel similar with like full fitness stuff, right?
Yeah. They're like, it's fitness now. It's not sexy.
Fitness,
like, come on, guys.
Like, strippers are bad. But what I do is different. And I hate that. Like, I'm like, no, we are doing this, but like, thank you to our sex workers. Thank you to the people who really heal in those ways too, right? And I think embody the parts of these practices that are essential in terms of the eroticism and the sexuality, right? And for some, it may not be erotic and sexual, right? And that's one of the beautiful things is it's like, if you're asexual, this is actually an amazing practice to have physical touch and intimacy and all of those things that come with, that hopefully, come with explicitly sexual practice. But I think that was a really important part of this practice for me, was to be able to deconstruct my sexuality and to reclaim my sexuality and to decide, when I want to be sexualized, when I want to be objectified, and when I'm also just expressing my sexuality and it's not for anyone else, right? Like, you can witness and observe, you're welcome. But I think that was a big thing. As a sacral creator, I feel like I was hypersexualized from the external world and therefore hypersexualized myself. Because I believed, in this puritanical, if you're nude or you're expressing through your body or you're expressing eroticism or some sort of like pleasure center, that you are explicitly wanting sexual attention and encounters and et cetera, right? Yeah. And I think that's why we have so much like sexual repression. And therefore, and the thing is, when you have sexual repression is when you get sexual deviancy.
Yes. All the distorted energy.
Yes. That comes from our inability to naturally and, express like, hey, I'm a person in a body and it's beautiful and, divine, and really come back to that like divine place when it comes to sex, for me has been really powerful with this art. So, I encourage people to not completely throw away the like, oh, it's just an art and there is no eroticism and sexuality component to it. But I encourage people to really think about and start to deconstruct what eroticism and sexuality means to them, right?
Yes.
Because I think that's a really big, beautiful part of this practice is like, what do you actually feel about sex? What do you actually feel about your sexuality, about others' sexuality, etc.? And coming to a place of more autonomy and ownership of your own, right? Because I think that is such a beautiful, essential part of this practice as well. So I like to mention that. I will say, to pitch to those locally in San Diego. If you haven't been to the Rope Collective, please come through. We would love to see you here. We have so many different options, and we are more of an educational space, which I love. It's very accessible. It's not, I love dungeons. No disrespect towards dungeons, but we are like not a dungeon space. We're like a very smooth vibes, educational, relaxed energy, and also very open to just like people who want to come observe, just come and engage in as much as you want, and things like this. And we're really focused on the artistry as well. So we do a lot of art shows. We do a lot of performance art. So we would love to see you for that. We've officially been put on the map of amazing traveling world renowned rope artists. So we had
well deserved
Hajime Kanoko recently. That was such an honor to have him from Japan. And we have a lot of other traveling artists that are going to start to come through. I will be going on maternity leave for a little while. But I'm excited to have my friend Eros from Oaxaca coming. And so she will be a big presence at the studio, and we'll be kind of filling my shoes a little here. And we just have an amazing collective of artists here and practitioners and people. So would love to see people here. And one of my hopes is that when I'm working more remotely, and doing maternity leave and focusing on motherhood, that I will be expanding our online offerings, our things like that. So please look out for in the future, if you aren't local to San Diego, the Rope Collective expanding for more offers for on an international level would be great.
Yes, I was going to ask, do you have any virtual offerings for those of us who want to continue the learning? So
they are coming.
Definitely stay tuned.
They are definitely coming. They are coming for sure. Because that's basically my plan is have the kid and then be able to stay home, but focus on the remote stuff. So that'll be great. And I'm very proud of the space in person that we've built, and feel that it can really continue to sustain and be its beautiful little living, breathing entity that it is, the studio, with me not being here every day. So so it will feel really nice to be able to expand our offerings when I'm not so tied to the physical studio.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, where can people find the offerings or stay up to date on all the current goodies?
Yeah. So theropecollective.com is always our most up to date for offerings and everything we have going on in the studio. And of course, as we expand into remote learning and remote offers and things like that will all be offered on through our website, theropecollective.com. Instagram's also a really good place to keep up with us, the Rope Collective on Instagram. We are going to be starting a Discord community forum, which will be very cool. That's going to be launching next week. So that is a way people can at least be part of some sort of remote community forum, and maybe ask questions and get feedback. But I would say those are the best ways to keep in touch with us.
Well, thank you so much, Toni, for being here today and sharing all these
great, juicy conversation. I was
juicy things.
Yeah, we got deep, baby.
I just love that, because this is all about our liberation, our liberating our hearts. And so thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And until next time, here's to liberating your wild feminine heart.
Bring the bass, give me a taste. They me the waste. I'm your little plaything. I got